Hollywood sells perfection with bright lights and flawless faces. The illusion is simple. Beauty equals success, and success protects you. But behind the applause sits a quieter truth, one measured in operating rooms, recovery beds, and irreversible choices. For some of the most influential figures of their era, cosmetic surgery was not about vanity. It was about survival in an industry that punishes aging and rewards illusion. Tonight, we examine 10 names whose influence shaped music, television, and popular culture before colliding with consequences no publicist could control. Some stories ended careers, others ended lives, and one near the top went on to reshape laws, families, and public memory itself. Stay with us, because what happened next was never meant to be seen. At his peak, Michael Jackson was not just famous, he was untouchable. Stadiums filled in seconds, records shattered globally, and his image became a symbol of perfection that crossed race, language, and borders. To the public, he looked like someone who had beaten the system, a child star who grew into the most powerful performer on earth. But behind closed doors, that image was slowly collapsing. Michael's relationship with cosmetic surgery did not begin as obsession. It began with pressure. Years of public scrutiny, a violent childhood, and relentless commentary about his face created a quiet war with his own reflection. One procedure became two. Two became routine. Each change promised control, confidence, and relief from the criticism that never stopped. Instead, it introduced medical complications that grew harder to hide. Multiple rhinoplasties weakened the structure of his nose. Scar tissue formed. Breathing became difficult. Infections followed. To manage the pain, prescriptions became constant companions. What started as post-surgical relief slowly blurred into dependency. Insiders described a man who could not sleep without medical help, who trusted anesthesia more than rest. By the late years, his body was no longer just exhausted from performance. It was fragile. Doctors rotated in and out. Warnings were ignored. The illusion had to survive, even if the body underneath could not. On the 25th of June 2009, that illusion finally collapsed. A routine attempt to sleep triggered acute respiratory failure. The world stopped with him. One physician later admitted, he wasn't chasing beauty anymore, he was chasing normal. Michael Jackson did not lose his life to one decision or one doctor. He lost it to years of pressure disguised as perfection. The same image that made him immortal also trapped him in a body that could no longer keep up. And if you think the cost of influence ended there, the next story proves how far that pressure can reach beyond the stage. To the public, Donda West was not a celebrity in the traditional sense. She was known as the steady presence behind one of the most influential artists of the modern era. An educator, a mentor, a grounding force. She represented intellect, discipline, and sacrifice. Her influence was quiet, but profound, especially within academic circles and the early rise of her son's career. But behind that composed image was a woman carrying immense pressure. As her son's fame grew, so did the scrutiny around appearances. Public events, red carpets, and constant cameras placed Donda in a world where aging was no longer private. Cosmetic surgery, in her mind, was not about excess or vanity. It was about confidence, about standing beside her son without feeling diminished by the spotlight. What she saw as a personal decision was shaped by an industry that rarely forgives imperfection. In 2007, she underwent multiple cosmetic procedures in a single session. Liposuction, breast reduction, extended anesthesia. The surgery itself was long, physically demanding, and risky for someone with underlying health conditions. Against medical advice, she chose to recover at home rather than under hospital supervision. It was a decision rooted in trust, optimism, and the belief that everything would be fine. It was not. Hours after returning home, her body began to fail. Breathing became labored, oxygen levels dropped. By the time help arrived, the damage was irreversible. Donda West was pronounced dead in the early morning hours, sending shockwaves through both the medical community and the entertainment world. What followed was not silence, but consequence. Her death directly contributed to changes in medical regulation in California, requiring mandatory physical examinations before cosmetic surgery. A law would later carry her name, but the impact did not stop there. Her passing deeply altered her son's emotional landscape, influencing his work, his behavior, and his relationship with the public for years to come. One family member later reflected, she thought she was doing something small. Donda West did not set out to change history, but her loss exposed how even those standing just outside fame can be pulled into its most dangerous expectations. And the next story proves that public pressure does not stop at national borders. Mary Wells once defined a sound that reshaped popular music. As one of Motown's earliest breakout stars, her voice carried warmth, vulnerability, and effortless charm. Songs like My Guy turned her into a household name at a time when black female artists were still fighting for visibility. She was young, successful, and inseparable from the image of elegance Motown sold to the world. But success did not protect her from insecurity. As the industry shifted and younger artists emerged, Mary's position began to slip. Record deals weakened. Financial struggles followed. With fewer appearances and less control over her career, attention slowly turned inward. She became increasingly focused on her appearance, especially features she had been criticized for since childhood. Cosmetic surgery, she believed, could help her reclaim the confidence that once came so easily on stage. She chose rhinoplasty, expecting a subtle correction. Instead, the procedure triggered a chain reaction no one anticipated. Complications developed soon after surgery. Infections followed, swelling spread. Her breathing became strained, and her voice, the very thing that built her legacy, began to fail. Multiple corrective attempts only worsened the damage. The surgeries did not restore her career, they dismantled it. The physical toll was devastating, but the emotional impact cut deeper. Singing became painful. Performing was no longer possible. Isolation replaced applause. As her health declined, she faced a diagnosis that changed everything: throat cancer, a disease that attacked the fragile remains of her vocal cords and left her struggling through daily life, without the one gift that defined her identity. Mary Wells died in 1992 at just 49 years old. The public remembered her smile, her sound, and the early promise of Motown's golden era. Few fully grasped how a single attempt to regain confidence accelerated the loss of both her voice and her future. One industry colleague later said, "She did not lose her talent, she lost the chance to use it." Her story stands as a quiet warning. Sometimes, the effort to return to who you once were ends by taking everything you still have. And the next story reveals how that same pressure followed even those who stood at the very top of national power. To millions of Nigerians, Stella Obasanjo represented dignity and stability at the highest level of power. As First Lady, she was admired for her poise, charity work, and calm presence beside a sitting president. In public, she appeared composed and confident, a national symbol of grace in a country where every public movement was closely watched. But even that position came with silent expectations. Living under constant scrutiny, appearance became part of the role. Aging was no longer private. Every photograph, every public appearance carried unspoken pressure to remain polished and flawless. Cosmetic surgery, for Stella, was not framed as transformation. It was framed as maintenance. A discreet adjustment before a milestone birthday, something controlled, something safe. In 2005, she traveled abroad for a cosmetic procedure, seeking privacy away from national attention. The surgery itself was presented as routine: liposuction under local anesthesia, no major risks, no prolonged recovery, no reason for concern. At least, that was the promise. But inside the operating room, a critical mistake occurred. Surgical instruments penetrated far beyond their intended area, damaging internal organs. The severity of the injury was not immediately acknowledged. Instead of intensive monitoring, she was sent back to recover outside a hospital setting. Within hours, her condition deteriorated rapidly. Severe abdominal pain escalated into systemic failure. By the time emergency care intervened, infection had spread throughout her body. Septic shock followed. In the early hours of October 2005, Stella Obasanjo was declared brain dead. News of her condition reached Nigeria before confirmation of her death, plunging the nation into shock. Her passing triggered widespread outrage. Questions emerged about medical oversight, accountability, and the growing industry of cosmetic medical tourism. While legal consequences followed, many felt justice arrived quietly compared to the magnitude of the loss. A first lady had entered a clinic seeking discretion and emerged as a global example of unchecked medical risk. One Nigerian official later stated, "She did not go abroad for beauty, she went because silence was promised." Stella Obasanjo's death revealed something unsettling. Even power cannot shield someone from an industry built on reassurance, speed, and profit. When perfection becomes expectation, even the most protected lives are left exposed. The story that follows shows how that same pressure lingers long after the applause fades. At her peak, Lil Kim was more than a rapper. She was a cultural force. In the late 1990s, her image reshaped hip-hop fashion, femininity, and power. Bold lyrics, fearless confidence, and unapologetic sexuality turned her into an icon whose influence reached far beyond music. To fans, she represented control in a genre that rarely allowed women to define themselves. Behind that image, however, control was slipping. The pressure did not begin with fame alone. It began with trauma. After a violent relationship left her physically and emotionally scarred, Lil Kim's relationship with her own face changed. Cosmetic surgery was not framed as reinvention at first. It was presented as repair, a way to erase pain, distance herself from the past, and regain ownership over her appearance. One procedure led to another. Subtle adjustments became dramatic alterations. Multiple rhinoplasties reshaped her nose beyond its structural limits. Scar tissue accumulated. Proportions shifted. Each attempt to correct the last only pushed her further from recognition. Cheek implants followed. Skin treatments altered her complexion. The face that once symbolized defiance slowly became a subject of public confusion and relentless scrutiny. The backlash was brutal. Headlines focused less on her music and more on speculation. Interviews became uncomfortable. Public appearances sparked shock rather than admiration. The industry that once celebrated her originality now treated her transformation as spectacle. Offers slowed. Creative momentum fractured. The confidence she once projected began to disappear behind silence. In rare moments of honesty, Lil Kim acknowledged the cost. She spoke about insecurity, about never feeling good enough, about chasing an image that kept moving further away. What the public saw as excess was, in reality, a prolonged attempt to feel safe inside her own skin. A former collaborator once said, "She wasn't trying to shock people, she was trying to disappear from the pain." Lil Kim did not lose relevance overnight. She lost the ability to be seen without judgment. Her story exposes a deeper truth about cosmetic surgery and celebrity culture. When healing is mistaken for transformation, the damage does not stop at the surface. For decades, Marina Shaw was admired for her voice, her control, and her presence. In the jazz world, she represented sophistication and restraint, a performer whose power came from nuance rather than spectacle. Her career was built on longevity, not trends, and her audience followed her well into later life. Aging, however, brought a different kind of pressure. As live performances became more selective and public appearances more visible, attention slowly shifted from her music to her face. Subtle comments, quiet comparisons, and industry expectations planted doubt where confidence once lived. Cosmetic procedures were introduced as maintenance rather than change, a way to remain presentable, a way to stay relevant without saying it out loud. The early procedures appeared harmless, minor adjustments, temporary fixes. Over time, repetition took its toll. Excessive Botox reduced facial mobility, tightened skin caused chronic discomfort. Headaches became frequent. Singing, once effortless, required strain. The expressions that once carried emotion on stage began to disappear, replaced by stiffness that audiences noticed even if they did not understand why. What followed was not public scandal, but quiet withdrawal. Shows were canceled. Appearances became rare. The industry did not criticize openly, it simply moved on. Behind the scenes, Marlena struggled with pain, isolation, and the realization that the attempt to preserve her image had compromised the very tool that defined her artistry. Friends later described her frustration. The voice remained, but the freedom was gone. Performing no longer felt natural. The body resisted. The face no longer responded. Confidence eroded in private, far from headlines or commentary. Marina Shaw passed away in 2024 at the age of 81. Her legacy in jazz remains secure, But her final years revealed a different side of cosmetic intervention. Not every consequence is sudden. Some unfold slowly, stealing comfort, expression, and purpose long before they steal life. For a brief moment, Hazel-E seemed perfectly positioned for modern celebrity. Reality television visibility, social media reach, and a carefully curated image placed her squarely inside a culture that rewarded appearance as currency. On screen, confidence was part of the brand. Off-screen, the pressure to maintain that image never slowed down. Cosmetic surgery was framed as strategy. In 2018, Hazel traveled abroad for a full cosmetic makeover. The promise was efficiency, affordability, and privacy. Multiple procedures in one trip, a controlled transformation designed to return her to the spotlight, sharper, younger, and more competitive. Clinics marketed safety. Social media reinforced the illusion. Everything appeared routine until recovery began. Within days, something went wrong. Her nose showed signs of severe infection. Skin darkened, tissue deteriorated, pain escalated rapidly. The clinic offered little support as her condition worsened, leaving her to confront a medical emergency far from home. When she returned to the United States, doctors identified extensive damage that threatened permanent facial disfigurement. Multiple surgeries followed. Hospitalization stretched on for months. What shocked the public was not just the injury, but her response. Hazel chose exposure over silence. From hospital beds, she shared images of her injuries online, raw, unfiltered. No glamour, no filters. Her warning was direct. Cheap surgery came with irreversible cost. The attention she regained was not the kind she ever intended to seek. Recovery did not restore what was lost. Scarring remained. Confidence fractured. Opportunities narrowed. The industry, once drawn to polished images, offered little space for visible consequence. Hazel's story became a cautionary tale passed around quietly, while the cycle that created it continued unchanged. A doctor later remarked, "She survived because she spoke. Many never get that chance." Her experience exposes a harsh truth about cosmetic culture in the age of social media. Visibility encourages risk, but when things collapse, accountability vanishes just as fast. What follows brings that same obsession to a younger generation, where the pursuit of an ideal body escalated far beyond correction and into permanent damage. Sanchoka's rise did not come from television studios or record labels. It was built inside phone screens, algorithms, and an audience trained to reward extremes. In East Africa's influencer culture, her exaggerated curves became her identity, her currency, and her protection in a space where attention decided value. That reward came with a condition. Maintaining the image required constant escalation. Cosmetic enhancements were not treated as medical decisions but as professional upkeep. Fillers, implants, repeated injections. Each procedure promised sharper definition, fuller curves, and greater online impact. Clinics reassured her. Audiences applauded the results. Few questioned the long-term cost. Over time, her body began to push back. Injected materials hardened. Infections developed beneath the skin. Pain became persistent, then chronic. Sitting, walking, even resting caused discomfort. Hospital visits became routine. Attempts to correct the damage introduced new scars and complications, deforming the very features that once fueled her success. The image remained online, but the reality behind it deteriorated rapidly. What made Sanchoka's case different was what happened next. Rather than retreat, she chose to speak openly. In a series of public statements, she admitted regret. She described constant pain, emotional exhaustion, and the fear of permanent damage. Her message was not polished or strategic. It was raw. A direct warning to young women chasing the same algorithm-driven standards she once embraced. The response was divided. Some praised her honesty. Others accused her of oversharing. Sponsorships faded. Visibility declined. Yet her voice reached an audience that glossy before and after images never could. She reframed beauty not as aspiration, but as consequence. A regional health advocate later noted, her body became evidence, not a trend. Handaviz. Sanchoka did not lose her life, but she lost something more difficult to restore. Physical comfort, trust in her own body, the illusion that enhancement could exist without cost. Her story exposes how quickly modern influence can turn self-modification into self-harm, especially when validation arrives faster than caution. The next case pushes that pursuit even further into a level of alteration so extreme that survival itself was put at risk. Princess Shingle became famous for something few people could ignore. Her extremely small waist was not just a physical trait, but a headline, a brand, and a spectacle that pushed her into viral fame across Africa and beyond. Interviews focused on measurements more than performances. Photos spread faster than film credits. Attention followed excess. That attention came at a cost her body could not absorb. The pursuit of an extreme silhouette escalated quickly. What began as cosmetic shaping evolved into radical intervention. Surgical procedures went beyond surface alteration, placing internal organs under constant strain. Repeated operations promised tighter curves and greater distinction, but each one weakened her body further. Pain became routine. Fatigue followed. Medical complications multiplied. Hospitalizations became frequent. Fainting spells were dismissed publicly, but privately they signaled deeper damage. Kidney function deteriorated. Heart complications emerged. The body that fueled her fame began to fail under the weight of expectations it was never designed to carry. Yet the image persisted online, frozen in time, detached from the reality unfolding off-camera. Eventually, Princess Shingle spoke openly. In emotional statements, she admitted regret and fear. She described how the obsession with measurements replaced concern for survival. Dialysis became part of her life. Financial strain followed medical bills. The illusion of control vanished, replaced by dependence on ongoing treatment. Her story resonated precisely because it broke the fantasy. Extreme beauty did not lead to freedom or success, it led to vulnerability. What the audience celebrated was never sustainable, only profitable for as long as the body could endure it. A medical professional later summarized it simply: "The body always collects its debt. I have no AUKUS." Princess Shingle's experience reveals a dangerous boundary where admiration turns into pressure and self-expression crosses into self-destruction. Fame did not save her. It accelerated the risk. The final story brings that same pressure back into childhood stardom, where insecurity was planted early and followed its subject into adulthood. Countess Vaughn grew up in front of the camera. As a child and teenage star, she was familiar to millions through sitcoms that shaped black television in the late 1990s and early 2000s. On screen, she was confident, funny, and effortlessly expressive. Off-screen, fame arrived early, before identity had time to fully form. Adulthood brought a harsher spotlight. As roles became scarce and public attention shifted, scrutiny around her body intensified. Tabloid commentary, online jokes, and industry silence replaced the warmth of her early success. After pregnancy, that pressure multiplied. Cosmetic surgery was framed as a reset, a way to reclaim control, restore confidence, and re-enter an industry that had quietly moved on. In 2013, she underwent liposuction and a tummy tuck. What followed was immediate and severe. Within days, her abdomen became infected, tissue turned necrotic. Emergency medical intervention was required to remove dead skin, leaving extensive scarring that could not be corrected. Pain was constant. Recovery was long. The physical damage was permanent. The emotional impact was just as devastating. The surgery meant to restore confidence instead deepened insecurity. Clothing choices changed. Public appearances became rare. The body that once supported her career now limited it. On reality television years later, she revealed the scars openly, describing how shame and regret replaced the promise of transformation. Countess Vaughn survived, but survival came with consequence: chronic pain, altered mobility, a visible reminder of a decision shaped by pressure rather than need. Her story differs from others on this list because it did not end in death, but in permanence. A lifetime carried on skin. One surgeon later commented, "Some scars heal, others simply teach." It is another interesting. Her experience closes this list with a sobering truth. Cosmetic surgery does not only change how someone looks, it can rewrite how they live, how they move, and how they see themselves long after the spotlight fades. The story does not end when the image is perfected. It ends in moments no one filmed, where the cost became real, private, and impossible to undo. What remains is never the spotlight, but the body left behind, carrying decisions made under pressure, comparison, and the fear of being replaced. These stories were never about vanity alone. They were about survival inside systems that reward perfection and quietly punish anything that looks human. Cosmetic surgery promised control, confidence, and protection. For some, it delivered brief relief. For others, it left scars, silence, or consequences that could not be reversed. Fame amplified every choice, but it never softened the outcome. So the question is not who made the worst decision. It is how many of these choices were ever truly free. If one story stayed with you longer than the rest, let us know. And if you want to keep exploring the parts of celebrity culture that rarely make headlines, subscribing is always there when you are ready.